Welcome. Today I'm sitting down with Liz Voigt, and we're going to talk about her hobby of raising rabbits. And a little later we're going to take a tour of her rabbitry, and I'm sure you'll find that interesting. And so Liz, thank you for allowing me to meet with you today and to talk about your rabbits. So tell me, how did you get into the hobby? And just give us a little history about that.
A little history. I have a lot of history, Peter.
Go for it.
Anyhow, in the early 70s, I was newly married and moved to a little old schoolhouse on 1 acre of land. And I started homesteading. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had my first boy in 1975, but before that, I had a half-acre garden. And between chickens and turkeys and ducks and pigs that we raised, we didn't go grocery shopping much. You know, we were basically eating everything that we raised. And it was fun, it was wonderful. I had never done that before. I also had a dear friend, because I worked before that at a zoo in Wasaga Beach. And I met a very sharp gal up there, Lorraine Shantz, and we became fast friends. And one winter, somebody had dropped off a domestic rabbit, and she felt sorry for it, so she started feeding it because it was living in her bushes outside her house. And she eventually got a mate for it and started raising rabbit, and I went to her house and I had my first rabbit hamburger. Boy, was it good. I wanted it on my menu. So I went out then and hunted up domestic rabbits. I was amazed at the scope of the lowly rabbit. I couldn't believe there were so many different breeds, shapes, sizes. I wanted a commercial rabbit, of course. So I picked up...
Explain what you mean by commercial rabbit.
A commercial rabbit is a bigger breed.
A meat rabbit.
A meat rabbit, basically.
A meat rabbit.
But it's not... Well, they're not just meat rabbits, Peter.
I agree,
because
but
we show them
when we talk about commercial versus the fancy...
they're bigger. There's a little more on the bones.
More to eat.
I was already eating wild rabbits, and there wasn't too much on them. And it's also a totally different meat that you get from the wild rabbit and the domestic rabbit, which was originally a wild rabbit, but human beings have made big changes to them.
So that was about what year that you started with the rabbits?
Oh, it was early 70s. I would say the first show I went to was 1975, so it must have been 73 that I really started.
So you just didn't get the rabbits to eat, you also began to show them. And maybe explain what a show is all about. What's the idea of the show?
Well, I told you it was a long story, Peter. My sister somehow, my sister who I'm very close to, Eloise, she ended up with Netherland dwarf. I don't know, I do know, but I'm not going to go into that story. It'll just make it longer. And then she discovered she was allergic to hay. So I was dumped with 7 Netherland dwarfs in 6 varieties. Oh, anyhow, they were cute and I liked them, and I thought, well, if there's rabbits, all these different breeds, there must be a rabbit club. I looked it up and found out that there was a Canadian Rabbit Club, the Dominion Rabbit and Kitty Breeders Association. So I checked that out and found out there was a meeting happening, and I went off to the meeting, my first meeting, and I believe that was down around Lakeshore somewhere.
In Toronto.
In Toronto, yes. It was a Toronto-based club. And then I heard they had 4 shows a year. Those 4 shows, of course, were Richmond Hill, the CNE, Woodbridge Fair, and the Royal. They've been at the Royal ever since the Royal's conception. You know, they've been there at that club.
They've been showing rabbits there, having shows.
Having shows, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that was exciting, you know, and all of a sudden I was into showing. I still ate them. Not the Netherlands, but I still had commercial breeds too.
As you got into the hobby, what did you enjoy the most about Now, did you raise just rabbits? But you said other animals, obviously, as well. Did you have the cavies back then as well?
I had cavies later.
Later.
Yeah, later.
So, but as you got into the rabbits, what is it besides being able to eat them and show them competitively? Is there anything else that you enjoyed about the hobby?
I liked the rabbits. It's a nice animal, a nice species. It can be a pet, right? You can eat it. You can show it. And when you got into showing, it was a little bit of a different game because there were standards and you had to follow those. So you had to learn about the standards, what they were looking for, what they were asking for, lots of conversation with other breeders. Their tips, would help you along the way.
That's what I like most about the hobby is the people. All the people that I've met over the years,
oh, for sure.
all over the place.
Oh, for sure.
With that's part that I enjoyed about the hobby, and I'm sure you did as well.
And from every kind of background. I mean,
all walks of life.
That's right. But
even ministers.
And we had the one thing in common: the
Yes.
lowly rabbit.
The lowly rabbit. That's
Yeah.
right. Gave you a start. Excellent, excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you, Liz. Yeah. So the breeds over the years, what are some of the breeds, if you can remember? Because I know you've raised a lot of different breeds.
I have. My first 3 commercial rabbits, I couldn't choose because this barn that I went to in North Toronto had a lot of rabbits. So I got a Californian, was one of my first. A silver martin. I loved the coloring on the silver martin, and I believe I got an argente. But I'm not sure about that. Anyhow, I fought with Pastorella maltosida, which they came down with a couple of days after I took them home. I battled that for a year, and I finally ate them. That was that. But then they were
That's
sick.
a way of fixing your health issues.
Problem. So anyhow, I then went to one of my first meetings, maybe not the first, no, it wasn't the first, but I acquired some Champagne Argentes from Nick and Monica Hildebrand. They'd been in it for a while. They had very good animals. I also then went to the Californian, and I got my stock from Ann Scheffler, who was showing in California and brought some back. That was a long time ago. She brought some back from one of the original breeders of the California. They were good animals.
Right.
And from there, satins. I liked satins. I couldn't resist the coat. They were beautiful. And I went for the Siamese satin, which is a difficult rabbit to come up with a really good color because, of course, they're a shaded variety, and any little nick or any little hair that was pulled out, it would come in dark. So they were a challenge. And I had those 3 in the beginning. I had the Californian a lot longer than that. I kept breeding and showing them for a long time.
Now, you must have had some fancy breeds as well over the year, did you?
Initially, I just had the Netherlands, and I really didn't keep them for too long.
Okay.
I had too many different varieties, and I really preferred the commercial breeds. Let's see, I also had Himalayan. No,
Yes, the Hemis,
I
yeah.
loved the Hemis. They were just so distinctive, they're their own style. And
Explain what a Himalayan looks like, what makes it different than the other rabbits for some people who might not know.
Well, it has a body type that you don't find in any other breed of rabbit, which is cylindrical. Right, so they're
Like a long
and
pop can on the side. That's the way I see it.
I know. And I got my Himalayans from Ray Montgomery, who lived up in Cocaboca Falls in Ontario. He was very active with the Arba and had beautiful Hemis. I really did like them. And then I got into Flemish Giant for a while. That was a beautiful rabbit too. Really nice disposition rabbit.
Now, you mentioned ARBA, that's the American Rabbit Breeders Association. And they have shows here in Ontario as well. They have
do.
sanctioned shows as well.
They do.
So we have breeders in Canada that are often a part of both organizations, and the standards are very close but not exact in some cases.
It makes it interesting.
It makes it interesting. So if of your breeds over the years, what at this point in your life is your most favorite breed of rabbit? Can you say one, Liz? Do you have one? Could you say there's one that I prefer the most?
I don't think so.
You just like rabbits.
It's like asking me which of my kids is my favorite. I don't have, I
Okay.
don't take, I love them all.
Okay, all right.
And some I haven't
hey,
had.
that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Over the years of raising them, how did you start out raising them? What were the cages like? What did that look like?
I had all wire cages mostly at that time. Although
Even in the beginning, in the 70s?
Even
yeah?
in the beginning, but
Yeah.
I had them outside. They weren't in heated quarters, so I usually put a very thick layer of hay or straw on the wire for the winter. I just found it was a lot easier. I was a mom, I was busy, and with that big garden, I was very busy. So I
That
tried
was the
to keep.
homesteading you were doing.
Yes.
You had the big garden. Okay, yeah.
And then I did, again, go to wire cages. I ended up, when we moved to Bradford, I had 250 rabbits and 150 cavies. That's a lot of animals to look after. So I had the rabbits in wire cages with the top part of the cages were fiberglass. And they were slanted, and I had them on 3 levels.
That's a lot, yeah.
On stands,
Yeah.
and it helped because then had big trays underneath, and all the manure went down over the cages and into the trays, and I would change those maybe once a month. It wasn't an everyday
What
thing.
you said the word cavie again. What's a cavie? Just
Cavie
explain
is a
that.
guinea pig, Peter.
A guinea pig. I know. I just want to make sure everybody else knows.
Okay.
You can't assume everyone knows.
I
So I'm
know.
just trying to. That's my job. That's what I'm trying to do as the interviewer here.
And being
Pull
the
things out.
carnivore that I am, I always wanted to try guinea pig because
No kidding.
I did know that originally that's what they were used for.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's in South America. South American countries, they still eat them.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
anyhow, I could never bring myself to kill one. I just couldn't. Besides, they were pretty small.
Yeah. Yes, they are. It's like having a pigeon versus a chicken.
Yeah, exactly.
So you started out with wire cages. Has any of your thinking changed about how you raise them, what you raise them on, your methodology?
Actually, yes. By the time then I moved, my barn moved many times. I was out at my partner Jim Wilson's farm for a while, and I started to use solid bottom cages. And that started because I had the Flemish, and I have since I first started breeding Flemish, I have met people who do raise them on wire, but they do have a lot of boards on the inside of the pen because that rabbit is heavy enough that they can do damage to their, to their paws.
Their hawks, yeah.
Yeah.
From sitting on the wire, which
Even
a lot of
their
the big
front-
rabbits have issues
Those-
with that.
yes, they do.
So many of us do put a piece of plywood or something in.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to put a screw under to set it in front of the feeder where they sit the most. And so you've...
Mm-hmm. No, then I decided to go in my barn now. It's all solid floors. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. I had very thick wood, on the bottom, but after I've had them here now for 20 years, and some of the corners are deteriorating.
Mm-hmm. Any other, what do you find advantage of the wood cages?
Saving kits mostly. Kits can come out of a box before they're ready, or sometimes are born on the wire if they come too quickly for the dough or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you will lose them on wire in the winter when it's cooler, sometimes even in the summer just from exposure. And I find that the solid floors, and I have a nice thick layer of litter on the floors, that often will save them. By the time I get out there, they're moving, sometimes not very much, but you know that you can hold them and warm them up carefully, and they will come around. So with saving kits, I personally feel the rabbits were happier. They were all over the pen, and happy to come up and see you, etc., etc.
So you would use shavings or
I use shavings. I stopped using straw. I had a problem with straw when I was raising Flemish Giant. And I'd clean out the pen to an inch and fill it full of shavings, and then I used straw because they were huge cages for the Flemish. My cages were 8 by 4 feet. And which you needed when you had a doe and 8 little ones. And after I cleaned them, the next day I'd come out, they were all bloated, the young ones. The adults were fine, but the young ones would bloat, and I couldn't figure out what was going on until I figured it was probably the straw. And what was growing on the straw, that they loved it and they chewed it all up, but anyhow, a lot of them died. Very few came through that bloat.
I found that barley straw was the best to use, and the problem you described before about losing the kits on the wire, that's very true. Near the end of my time of raising rabbits, I figured out a way of getting around that. I attached the nest box at the end with only a 2-inch lip that they could get, if they got out, they could get in.
They could
get
around,
back in.
Yes, and get back in.
And they could always find their way back, and I had far less loss that way. So with a nest box in a cage, if they come out with the doe, usually they're sucklings still, they come out, they're dead in an hour. At this time of year in the winter or even in cool summers, they don't last very long because they have not much protection. But so that's an issue. What's a disadvantage of the wood floor cages?
It's a lot of work.
A lot of work. That's what I was going to say. And where you put all the stuff. Because you have more volume because of the straw and the shavings.
Well, actually, I tend to, there's 2 kinds of rabbits. There's one rabbit that will do its business everywhere in the pen, and there's another one that only likes one corner. And I prefer them. And I tend to keep them.
Is that within a breed, or certain breeds have that tendency?
All breeds.
So some
All
rabbits
the breeds are the same. Some are just messy, they mess up the whole. Now, the really messy ones who stir it up and make it into compost almost, by the time you clean it, they're good too, because everything's dry. There's not a super wet corner, but there's others that just go in one corner.
You prefer those?
Well, it saves on shavings because I don't have to, every time I would clean the wet corner, more than I would clean the rest that stays clean and dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you share any highlights or experiences you've had with raising rabbits, either with the shows or anything with the hobby?
Yeah. I can. I don't know if they're that special. I did meet Prince Philip through rabbits.
Was that at the Royal?
That was at the Royal.
Royal Winter Fair?
The Royal Winter Fair. I've met a lot of pretty outstanding people through the years. Many of them were exceptional breeders, and I would say going down to the ARBA convention was a huge eye-opener as to how big this hobby really is. It's the biggest in the U.S. compared to anywhere else in the world, and there's people that come from all over the world to go to that convention because there is so much offered there. And we live pretty close.
And what I find is when you're there, you don't have to explain to anybody why you like rabbits in the hobby.
Not
Everybody
at all. You just have to explain what you're raising.
Yes. You don't have to
And
explain
how
why.
you're doing.
Why you do it. Yeah.
So are you just talking about, I had another memorable moment. I showed at the convention a couple of years, as well as had a booth there, which I told you about. I had good times there. and I met a lot of interesting people from all over the world. When I showed, I came second in a class of 70. That was pretty exciting. It was so exciting, I thought I was going to be sick. The rabbit just kept staying there.
That is exciting,
yeah.
when you have one that
Yeah.
stays on the table and it's a big class like that.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
It is very exciting.
I got a couple of firsts, but they were smaller classes, so I don't consider that the achievement that the second out of 70 was. That was in California.
I remember my goal to going to an Arabic convention would be to, one of my goals was to get into the top 10. If I could get a rabbit in the top 10, I was happy. And,
sure.
and then to win some classes, like New Zealand
Yeah.
would have big
Yeah.
classes, 60, 70,
Yes.
even 100. And so yes, to win that is exciting, yeah.
Now, another milestone for me happened, I don't even know what year it was, but it was a while ago. This is when we had friar classes that were a complete friar class. The rabbits were judged.
Explain what you mean by friar class. What's a friar class?
A friar class is a class for a young rabbit, maximum 5 pounds, that is going to be sent off for meat. It's a meat class.
So they would be judged live?
We still have friar classes now.
Okay. I remember going where they would be judged live and then they would dress them out and judge them dressed as well.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay, and our friar class still have the standard for that. I think it's in the standard, in our standards still. But we don't kill them anymore. We used to judge them live, have them dressed out, bring them back and have the carcasses judged. I watched Bing Harris in Orono. He judged 60 friars. I could not believe it could be done. And he just did it just so easily. So my goal was to be able to judge a class of at least 10, and be able to judge them first to 10 live, and the same ones first to 10 as a carcass. And I was able to do it. Now that's interesting because you have to really think about what's going on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you have to know what's underneath the skin. So it was a challenge, and I was very proud of myself when I did that.
Before we go out to the barn, is there anything else that's on your mind that you'd like to talk about, your hobby of raising rabbits? Before we go out to the barn, before we go out to the rabbitry, let me get that right.
Okay,
We call it a rabbitry.
This hobby has given me much joy. I have wonderful memories.
Yeah.
I've met fantastic people. They have one thing in common, and they're from all walks of life.
And all the places you've been because of the rabbits.
Places I've been, the interests I have everywhere. If there's a rabbit around, I'm checking it out. So I give thanks that I found the rabbit.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. There are places that we've gone, people we've met that would have never happened outside of the hobby.
That's right.
And we can be thankful for that. And
I am.
very good. Well, we're going
And
to...
as you can see, right over here, it may not be on screen, I have them in my house. Much to my grandchildren's delight.
I bet.
And my son's wonderment. I keep telling them it's coming to an end, and they keep saying, we've heard that before.
It is hard to come to an end, but as we physically becomes more challenging, and because it's not easy raising rabbits, it is a lot of work carrying them, the carriers and the feed and all of that. And so we're going to go out to the barn. We'll talk a little bit more about feed out there, and we'll have a look out there. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to go out to the rabbitry now. I keep calling it the barn, but we're going to go to the rabbitry and have a tour there. Thank you. So we're in your barn here now, your rabbitry. Let me get that straight. We're in the rabbitry here, and Say that again?
You can call it either.
I know. I would call them both. And so you can see here that they're all wood cages, some bigger, some smaller, for various stages in their lives.
This is a full cage. They're 2.5 out and 3 wide, so this is a 6 by 2.5. This one I put a separator in the middle, and so I can keep bucks in here or younger animals growing up. And then when you come down this way, these cages are for the smaller breeds. Some of them are full, both sides. That will be for mostly my does, and litters need growing space. And then for bucks, I don't think, yeah, then, no, that one's a double cage too. But it used to be separated, open it up for this doe. But I do have some for growing rabbits or for some older bucks that just have the 2.5 by 2 pen.
So how many pens do you have in here?
40.
40. And now ventilation. How does ventilation work in your barn?
Well, as you can see, I have a big industrial fan over there. And I have also up here, this is a temperature gauge. So in the summer and in the winter, I turn it a little differently. If it gets really, really cold, it turns the fan off. And then as it warms up, it'll turn it back on again.
So what breeds of rabbits do you have in here today, Liz?
Well,
I see New Zealand whites.
Yes, I have New Zealand white. I have one red. Down here at the bottom. Annoyingly, when you breed a red to a white, you get black. And so then you would have to breed back to get more red, which I don't have the room to do, so he's just a token that I can use in my rabbit displays just to show people the different variety of rabbits. And I have a Himalayan here, one left. He got, somebody shaved that rabbit at the Royal 2 years ago, and he, shaved a patch on his back. When the hair grew back in, it grew in jet black, which is a characteristic of the Himalayan.
And a DQ, disqualification.
Now it's gray. It has never come back in white. So I have that. I have an animal over here, which is supposed to be a lion head. It was dropped at my door. Happens when people know you have rabbits. And she's not friendly, so I can't pass her on as a pet. She's here.
Now, how do you feed, Liz? What do you feed?
I feed. I've had trouble with my feed. I used to feed Floridale and I really did like it. I'd advise anybody to use the feed that's easily accessible. You know, you don't want to be driving miles because then you have to store it, and your feed has to be stored properly.
So you feed rabbit pellets.
I feed rabbit pellets, and I give my rabbits treats. On top of the pellets, I always give about 1/3 of a cup of oats, rolled oats. They love it. That gets them going, and I feed hay, and that's it. Now, not totally true. In the spring, I feed dandelions because I don't do any fertilizing or any spraying of my gardens around here, and so I'm able to feed the fresh greens. I also have about 3 different plants that I use to feed animals who've gone off their feed or seem to be a bit sick. Wild mallow is one. What are the other 2? I've got 2 others. I can't even think of their names right now, but I have noted that in one of the bulletins, so it's there.
Now, when you feed hay, do you feed Timothy hay? Or do you just feed what you can get?
I feed what I can get. I prefer more Timothy than alfalfa. Alfalfa is a little bit too rich for rabbits, and it's also very high in protein. And I give them a lot of hay. They love their hay.
I found that if you can get Timothy, it's the best. That has more
Yes.
roughage, and
Yeah.
if you can get a good Timothy. But that is a problem, isn't it? Because the farmers have gone to these great big bales of everything,
Exactly.
and you can't
It's
get the
very
little
hard to
bales
get a
anymore.
square bale.
Yes,
And
yeah.
just remember that if it's a big heavy bale, put it back. You don't want it. The lighter it is, the airier it is, and the drier it is. And once that hay goes moldy, you cannot feed it anymore.
Now, do you want to bring a rabbit out and just show us one?
I can do that if he'll come out. He won't be too happy. This is a young New Zealand I have that I quite like. Getting hit on the head with the doors. I have the doors come up, and the reason I do that is that the hinges don't have a chance of getting wet or dirty. They stay clean, but it is a bit of a pain. I have to use these little things here to... He's a little skittish. Stop. Stop.
And what you like about this guy? Or doe? Is it a buck or a doe to start with?
It's a buck.
It's a buck. And what do you like about this buck?
I like him. I like his body length. It's short, fairly short. If I can get him to sit properly, he's been a bit squirrely. I like the top line. It's full. I like his shoulder as well. He's got a good shoulder. Comes back here over the hind quarter. He has good depth. He needs to fill in a little bit here. It's also fairly full on the back. And one thing I've been going for, which I haven't had for a while, is a really nicely finished coat. And because that, regardless of what a rabbit has or hasn't, if it doesn't have that finish of coat, he's not going to show it off. It'll take away from him, so that's important. I have his brother. I could bring the brother out and see which one we prefer.
You've got a New Zealand buck there.
Yeah, he's just 6'8".
Which means he's between 6 and 8 months of age.
Yep.
And what do you like about this fella?
We hate the word balance, don't we? Okay, I hate the word balance, but I like his balance. He's got good depth over the hind quarter. He's also quite full over the hind quarter. He's got a fairly good loin. He's got to fill out a little more hair, which I'm hoping he will. He's also got a strong shoulder. Nice smooth lines. And the finish of his coat shows it off. Okay, that is important, and I've had some trouble with coat finish in the past years, so I'm pretty happy with this rabbit. He's got a nice buck head, and he's got a really wide stance in his hind legs and in his hocks, which means if he fills out the way he could, he'll be good for spring shows.
Thank you.
And I
Anything-
have to handle him a little more so he's a little happier about coming
Anything
out.
else you want to tell us about your rabbitry, Liz?
Oh, what can I tell you? Well, I have heat. I
Aha.
took a floorboard and I put it up on the wall in case I don't want hay or anything coming in touch with it and starting a fire in here. I've gone through a barn fire before. It's not fun. That was when I had 250 rabbits, and I got them all out of the barn except for 12. And I also have an air conditioner, because when it's getting very, very warm in Barrie, we were up over 30 a lot of days, and when that happens, my bunnies get air, Peter. going to put him back now.